What's usually rather dinky but extends to almost 7 inches on demand and fits comfortably inside of your pants? Why, it's the fresh new Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 5, of course. Nice. Unlike the massive Z Fold 5, this year's Flipper looks significantly different to its predecessor thanks to that massively enlarged cover screen. You've got premium specs crammed into something so tiny it could almost be a smartphone for ants. But if you want one, it will cost you. Over $1,000 here in Blighty to be precise, unless you manage to carve a good chunk out of that with Samsung's tasty trade-in deals. But anyway, I've been using the Galaxy Z Flip 5 as my full-time smartphone for a week now, so here's my in-depth review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So this year's Flip looks a lot more refined than previous incarnations, with an all-new redesigned hinge that doesn't leave an awkward, ugly gap. So now Samsung's mini foldable looks just as premium as rivals from Motorola, Oppo, etc. This thing glides with zero effort into all of my trouser pockets, even my skinniest of skinny jeans. And when it is tucked away, unlike the massive Z Fold 5, it's not constantly tickling my urethra. It's always a bonus. The cream one and this here mint model are my favourite of the 4 colours on offer. And in fact, I reckon the Galaxy Z Flip 5 is the best looking of Samsung's 2023 smartphones, with a smart, sleek finish well suited to something so small. Sammy's bigger blowers do tend to look a wee bit bland, but I think the simple, straightforward design works on something so compact as the Galaxy Z Flip 5. And 3 weeks on from when I first slipped this thing out of its packaging, it still looks fairly box fresh thanks to the Victus 2 glass covering on the front and back ends, and you've got that armour aluminium shenanigans for the edging and that hinge. So far, the only sign of wear and tear is a couple of weeny, light little scratches on that mint surface. Although all of those glass edges do get rather smudgy when you're handling the Z Flip 5, especially that cover screen. I'm constantly buffing this bloody thing up because it just gets coated in fingerprints and dust. And the rims of those wee jutty out camera lenses as well are absolute magnets for dust and grime and pocket fluff. But hey, as long as you don't mind constantly rubbing it against your pants or your shirt or whatever, you're all good. And it's IPX8 water resistant again as well, so it can get as wet as you want. Just give it a towel and off, no worries. I found that edge mounted fingerprint sensor worked pretty well here on the Z Flip 5. I only really had issues when my hands were a bit moist from just washing my hands or whatever. And the face unlock is always a dependable backup option, which works with both the external and the internal cameras. And on the software side, Android 13 and One UI have been squished together lovingly as usual, with Samsung's promise of 5 years of software support to keep this thing from getting stale. And yeah, One UI 5 can still be a wee bit bulky here on the Z Flip 5, but it's still early days. Hopefully Samsung will crush most of these bugs in an imminent update. That flex window cover screen is a 3.4-inch Super AMOLED panel, and it's an absolute beauty. The 720x748 resolution keeps the visuals pretty crisp, and it is just as vibrant as any other Samsung screen, not to mention bright enough to clearly see what's going on, even when Mr. Sunshine actually decides to show his happy f***ing face. This does top off at 60Hz, however, so it's not quite as smooth and fluid as some rivals like the Moto RAZR 40 Ultra, and you can tell. But you got lots of customization options to personalize the cover screen, including slapping on your own photos, swapping out and rearranging the various widgets, changing up their colors, yada yada. I gotta say, overall, it's a pretty bloody slick UI on here, although it could use a wee bit of tinkering. For instance, when you swipe down to access the toggles, this is handy for turning on the torch, toggling the Wi-Fi, etc. But there's no do not disturb option here, while Samsung has included a screen recorder for some reason. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to actually edit this lineup. If somebody's figured it out, please do let me know in the comments below. You can quickly access your notifications, but you can't delete spammy emails and other crap using the cover screen. You'll need to flip open the phone for that. And you can swipe up to access the Samsung Wallet, but Google Wallet fans are shit out of luck. I do love Samsung's pinch to zoom feature, so you can zip straight to any widget that you need, and the timer and calendar widgets are very handy. Now you could also quickly respond to any messages you receive on WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, etc. right there via the cover screen, although this is of course best done using your voice. Otherwise, that teeny keyboard is likely to frustrate you to the point of hurling this miniature prick off the nearest wall. And while the media widget pops up when you're playing audio on the phone, this doesn't allow you to swap between different types of media, unlike the notifications bar. So if you're listening to music, you want to switch to the last podcast you were playing or vice versa, you'll need to flip open again. And likewise, when your album or podcast finishes, you will need to open up to choose another. Now by default, a small number of third-party apps are supported on the cover screen. Personally, I still had to open up the Z Flip 5 for most of what I wanted to do. That is until I had a gander at Samsung's own Galaxy App Store and downloaded the Good Lock app. If you open up Good Lock on the Z Flip 5 and then tap this Life Up section down at the bottom, you'll find something tucked away in there called Multi-Star, and this is an absolute game changer. What this is another widget that you can add to the cover screen, and it basically allows you to open any app you've got installed on your phone on the Z Flip 5's external display. And with that done, I could finally change what audio was playing on the fly, I could delete emails without having to open the phone, I could authorize payments, the works. And yeah, that external screen ain't always amazing. For instance, in the likes of Audible, you can actually browse your library because there's just not enough space. And as for reading web pages, well, good frickin' luck. But it's certainly nice to have the option to awkwardly attempt these things. You can even play fun little games on that cover screen just like you can with the Motorola RAZR 40 Ultra. So with these workarounds, it's almost as good as Motorola's blower, but it is a shame that you have to fiddle about with it in order to get it that good. And that definitely was a game changer, as I say, because flipping open the Galaxy Z Flip 5 ain't particularly easy one-handed. It's sort of fine when you get the hang of it. In fact, I seem to have perfected the technique just now on camera because quite often I'm there like, I certainly feel like I've got a much more muscular thumb after the past 7 days. Now, one of the benefits of the stiff hinge is you can prop open the Galaxy Z Flip 5, ideal for watching something on that teeny screen when you need to go hands-free. I wouldn't recommend doing it often because it involves a lot of squinting, but it does work fine for casually catching up with some YouTube watch later lists, etc. And it also works well the other way, which is a good setup for your video chats. Inside the Galaxy Z Flip 5, you've got a mighty 6.7-inch internal screen using Samsung's dynamic AMOLED 2X tech once again. It's a Full HD Plus resolution, 2640 by 1080, so images are again pleasingly sharp, while that contrast is simply stunning. You've got HDR10 streaming support in apps like Netflix, and that stretched aspect ratio is very well suited to cinematic content. You do have to deal with the crease though, and that shiny screen protector as usual, although that fold was out of my mind almost immediately, especially as you can't really see it when you're staring head on at the display. That visibility isn't too bad in strong daylight, not quite as good as the Z Fold 5 however, and I did notice that when I was wearing shades there were lots of colourful swirly patterns dancing across the glossy surface of that screen protector, kind of like staring at an oil slick. I also found that that screen was occasionally just a bit too bright, especially when I was lying in bed in the dark, either early in the morning or last thing at night. I usually had to jump into the old toggles and manually set that extra dim setting. But those are my only quibbles. Apart from that, it's all good, and the refresh rate does now scale from 1 Hz all the way up to 120 Hz. And the Galaxy Z Flip 5 does sport stereo speakers, but that earpiece effort is rather weak compared with the bottom speaker. Good news though, the audio is as powerful as most non-flexi phones on the top volume, and I've had a perfect experience streaming to Bluetooth earbuds and headphones this past week. And bugger all complaints when it comes to the performance really, because Samsung has managed to stuff a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 inside of the Galaxy Z Flip 5, same as the Fold 5 and those S23 flagships. And it's only backed by 8 gigs of RAM, but I had no issues running any apps or indeed getting some gaming on the go. You've obviously got a proper widescreen view of the action here on the Z Flip 5, and even if you're into hardcore stuff like Genshin Impact, you will enjoy a smooth, fluid gameplay experience, even on those higher graphics settings. The Galaxy Z Flip 5 does start to get rather warm when you've been gaming for more than about half an hour, but it never seems to heat up to a finger-toasting degree, and it never really hampers the performance. In fact, the only real bit of slowdown that I've noticed here on the Z Flip 5 over this past week is occasionally it'll take a couple of seconds just to switch between the different lenses, especially when swapping between the selfie and the rear lenses. And occasionally there'll be a bit of a judder when you're swapping between photo and video modes as well. A couple of seconds, as you can see there, not the nippiest. But that's it as far as my morning is concerned, otherwise all good. And the connectivity has been generally fine. I've had no issues with signal strength when I've been out and about using the mobile networks. However, just like the Z Fold 5, this Samsung blower does disconnect all too merrily from Wi-Fi whenever it thinks that the network strength isn't quite as strong as it likes, and it does so with absolutely bugger all warning, which is really helpful. This happened to me several times a day, even when using my home network, which was running absolutely fine with a perfect signal strength. And the reason it does this is because of an option tucked away in the intelligent Wi-Fi settings, which clearly ain't as clever as it thinks it is. So make sure you disable that if you don't want your data allowance to be absolutely rinsed. As for the battery tech, well, it's once again a mere 3700 mAh capacity cell stuffed inside of the Z Flip 5, same as last year, and that will prove a problem if you find yourself using your smartphone as much as I do. I'm talking more than sort of 5 hours of screen on time a day. That battery life does seem to be improving slowly as the Galaxy Z Flip 5 learns my daily habits, but every single day I've been using this smartphone, it's been in power saving mode by the evenings, and about half of the days I've been using it, it's been fully drained before I've had a chance to plug it in at night time. And that's definitely the case when you're using the camera a fair bit, but as I say, if you tend to get more than 5 hours of screen on time a day, you'll either want to carry around a power pack just to be on the safe side, or look elsewhere. And of course it's Samsung's usual super fast charging solution on here, so what that means is if it is almost fully drained, it'll take a good hour and a half to power back up to full. So for most people it's going to be a plug it in and charge it overnight situation. But at least you've got wireless charging support as well for a bit of flexibility. Oh, and it's your choice of storage as well, 256 or 512 gigs, not expandable of course, no surprises there. So last up, the optics, and that dual lens setup is essentially the same hardware as last year. We're talking a 12 meg dual pixel focus primary sensor with optical image stabilization, backed by another simple 12 meg ultra wide angle shooter. As always, there's no telephoto shooter on this bad boy, not really a surprise given its compact nature. Now that external camera can be used to take selfies quite comfortably, with fast access to a small number of features and toggles. And it's certainly a lot easier than it used to be thanks to that enlarged cover screen, so you're not squinting quite as hard, and of course you've got those handy hand gestures. By default it shoots square images, but you can change the aspect ratio easily enough. And hey, check out this snazzy Google hat I got in the post. Woof. But yank open the Galaxy Z Flip 5 and you'll have access to all of the usual bonus Samsung camera features, toggles, settings, whatever, including all the stuff you'll find on the likes of the Galaxy S23. It's got the likes of the portrait mode, of course. If you flip to the more section, you've got a night mode, food mode, panorama, and of course good old pro mode, so you can manually tweak the settings. ISO levels, white balance, etc. get exactly the kind of snap you want. And for my week of testing, I mostly stuck to the auto mode, and I found that the Z Flip 5 has a fairly dependable camera setup as long as your subject is well lit. Colours are boosted a wee bit as usual to make everything look all splendid, pretty standard trick of Samsung's, but I really like the look of most of my test shots, especially as that focus is super fast and you can snap away to get lots of great action pics. Portrait mode works a charm as usual, and even when you're shooting against a strong backlight, you're generally going to get an okay photo spaffed out at the other end. However, in more ambient light, I did find that I had a lot of blurry snaps when shooting living subjects, while pictures also looked more grainy. And you'll certainly want to get that night mode on the go when snapping in the evening to help brighten up your shot and keep it from looking too flat. That ultra wide angle shooter does its job without much panache, just giving you a pullback view when you need it. And of course, as there's no telephoto shooter here and it's a mere 12 meg primary camera sensor, then any kind of zoom in is just bad times. Once you start to pinch the Z Flip 5's display to crop in, you will quickly notice a dip in that image quality, so it is just best avoided. Thankfully, however, as always, the video quality is great from Samsung. This bendy Galaxy can shoot up to 4K resolution footage, no 8K option here sadly. But it can record at either 30 or 60 frames per second, and I found that the picture quality was nice and crisp, the stabilization is solid, get those nice poppy colors again, and the audio pickup nice and crisp and clear from all directions. But of course, as with taking photos, you've got the usual limitations, don't even bother at nighttime really. As for that 10 megapixel internal selfie cam, well, this is again recycled hardware, but of course you can take selfies using the external camera setup. So this internal wee cam is mostly just used for your video chats, bit of Skype and Zoom and whatever. Just prop up the Z Flip 5 on any surface and you are good to go. And again, the video quality isn't fantastic, but it's more than good enough for video chat. And that audio pickup, absolutely solid. Even if you move quite a distance away from the phone, it'll clearly pick up your voice. So that right there is my full final frank review of Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip 5 after using it as my full-time phone for a week. And I've got to say, unlike the Z Fold 5, it is a massive improvement on the previous generation, purely because of that enlarged cover display once you get the good lock shenanigans on the go. If you don't use that wee hack, then unfortunately it is quite limited, just like the Oppo Find N2 Flip, and not quite as enjoyable as the Motorola RAZR 40 Ultra. It's a shame that the battery life is no better than previous generations and the camera is still a bit of a dud when the lighting isn't just right, but those gripes aside, if you do want something that's incredibly dinky to fit inside of your pocket and a very slick bit of hardware indeed, well, the Z Flip 5 is well worth considering. That's what I reckon anyway. It'd be great to hear your thoughts down below. If you've been using the Z Flip 5 as your full-time smartphone as well, please do leave your mini review in the comments. Poke subscribe, ding that notifications bell, the usual bollocks, and have yourselves a bloody wonderful rest of the week. Cheers!